It started as a whisper in the void, a transmission that slipped quietly through the darkness between stars, carrying a voice that spoke in every known language of the galaxy, clear, calm, and full of warmth. This is Earth, calling to the Council and all civilizations beyond. We come in peace. For a moment, the galaxy listened. It was rare, almost unthinkable, for a new species to speak with such humility. The signal reached worlds of ice, gas, and metal, echoing through space stations and trade networks. People stopped what they were doing to hear it. The words were soft but powerful, a message filled with hope. Humanity promised alliance, not war, friendship, not control. They spoke of cooperation, of building bridges between species, of ending conflicts that had lasted centuries. The message ended with one final phrase, one that made some smile and others roll their eyes. We believe peace is the highest form of strength. For a brief moment, the stars were quiet, as if waiting for something. And then came the laughter. It began on one world, then another, spreading like fire through the galactic networks. News channels ran endless loops of the human ambassador speaking. Alien commentators mocked Earth's sincerity, calling it cute, primitive, the plea of a child that doesn't understand how the galaxy works. Memes and broadcasts filled the data streams. Images of humans holding up flowers in front of battle cruisers, jokes about the monkeys who thought kindness was a weapon. The Council held an official meeting, not to respond with diplomacy, but to mock the message publicly. Their spokesperson, an elder of the Varan species with golden skin and 6 eyes, looked into the cameras and said, Earth's mistake is believing peace comes from words. Peace comes from fear. If they wish to survive, they will learn that soon enough. On the surface of Earth, the transmission replayed again and again. The people didn't laugh. They watched in silence. In the United Earth Command Center, deep beneath Geneva, the leaders of the Terran Federation sat in a circular room, holograms of the galaxy spinning slowly above the table. Admiral Sloan, a man whose hair had long turned silver, leaned forward with his hands folded. They laughed, he said quietly. Good. Around him, silence hung like a blade. General Zhao, the head of planetary defense, frowned. With respect, sir, why is that good? Sloane's eyes reflected the faint blue glow of the hologram. Because it means they're not afraid yet. And when they finally are, they'll remember that this was our first language, mercy. The Earth's message had never been what it seemed. It was not a plea for peace, but a test. A single broadcast designed to measure how the galaxy would react. Humanity had learned long ago that those who mocked kindness were the ones who only understood power. They had seen it in their own history, on their own soil, across their own wars. And when humanity united under one flag, they had sworn never to start another war, but also never to bow to one again. So when the laughter reached Earth's ears, they didn't reply. They didn't send another message or demand respect. They simply stopped talking. And across the stars, that silence was misread as fear. Weeks passed. The Council's worlds moved on, secure in their arrogance. Merchants joked about selling peace bouquets to the Terrans. Military commanders used Earth as an example of weakness in their training programs. Remember the humans, they said. They asked for peace instead of preparing for war. But deep within the Sol system, something was happening that the Council's senses could not see. The Earth grew quieter, its digital chatter fading as communications went dark. Satellites disappeared from public scans. The orbital docks near Jupiter, once used for mining, went offline. Even the lunar colonies stopped broadcasting. The galaxy thought humanity had given up. In truth, humanity had simply closed the door. Beneath the dark side of the moon, in a massive underground chamber sealed for over 100 years, the hum of engines stirred for the first time. A voice echoed through the cavern. Fleet Command authorization confirmed. Project Aegis is active. Lights flickered to life, revealing rows upon rows of colossal ships that had never appeared on any Council record. Their hulls bore no markings, only the emblem of a single blue star surrounded by 12 rings, the symbol of Earth's unified defense. Above them, automated drones darted through the air, inspecting each vessel as systems powered up. A fleet that had been built in silence was finally awakening. Far above the planet, inside the orbital defense array known as Sentinel Station, Commander Arya Kent stood before the viewing deck, her reflection blending with the Earth below. She had been a child when the last Great War ended, a war fought not against aliens, but against humanity itself. "We swore we'd never raise our weapons again," she whispered. Her second-in-command, a tall man with a scar running down his jaw, nodded. "We're not raising them," he said quietly. "We're remembering why we built them." The commander's eyes hardened. "They think our peace is weakness." "Then they've never met a human who ran out of patience," he said. They turned back to the viewport as the stars beyond shimmered. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Council met once more. Their great chamber, built in orbit around a dying star, glowed with silver light. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the tiers, their voices a rising storm of arrogance. "Earth remains silent," one delegate said. "Perhaps they've realized their mistake." Another laughed, his tendrils curling with amusement. "If they want to survive, they'll beg to join the Council as servants." Only one voice in that hall did not laugh. An old scholar, the historian Thalen of Eshra, raised his head slowly. "I have studied humanity's wars," he said. "Their history is not one of submission. It is one of fire. When they stop speaking, it is not surrender. It is the breath they take before they burn everything in their path." The room erupted in laughter once more, dismissing the warning. But Thalen was right. Humanity had gone silent before, during their world wars, their revolutions, their darkest hours. Every time, it had meant one thing: they were preparing. Back on Earth, the last signal was sent to every colony in the Sol system. The message was brief and final: Protocol Phoenix is authorized. In a moment, deep space stations, research outposts, and dormant war satellites across the system activated. Codes locked for centuries came online. The old programs built by the earliest Terran defense networks blinked awake like sleeping gods. AI constructs hidden beneath Mars and Titan began running scenarios at speeds faster than light. They did not ask for permission. They already had it. On the ground, civilians went on with their lives unaware, their skies calm, their news silent. The world's governments, now united under the Terran coalition, maintained the illusion of peace, letting the galaxy believe Earth had retreated. But under every calm surface was steel. The factories on Luna began producing materials that had no listed purpose. The mining drones on Europa sent shipments that never arrived at the Council's trade hubs. Even the Terran embassy on EOS Prime quietly packed its archives and shut its doors. And then came the day that changed everything. The Council's exploration fleet, the same one that had mocked humanity's message, decided to enter Sol space without permission. The lead ship, the Honor of Threx, sent a transmission as it crossed the edge of Pluto's orbit. "Attention, Terrans," the alien captain said mockingly. "We have come to ensure your security. Do not resist." The transmission was broadcast across hundreds of Council channels, and laughter filled the networks once again. But within the command center on Mars, Admiral Sloan received the signal in silence. His aide looked at him nervously. "Orders, sir." Sloan's voice was calm. "None. Let them come." For 3 days, the alien fleet advanced. They reported no resistance. They mocked the humans for their cowardice. And then, on the 4th day, every one of their ships vanished. No wreckage. No signal. Nothing. The Council sent search parties, but they found only silence. That was when the laughter began to die. A week later, a strange transmission was detected across the galactic network. It wasn't a message of peace this time, but a mirror of the one Earth had sent before. The same voice, the same calm tone, but with a new ending: "You ignored our peace. You mistook kindness for fear. We warned you once. There will not be a second." For the first time in centuries, the Council's chambers went completely silent. The same media that had mocked Earth replayed the message on endless loop, searching for meaning. But there was none to find. Humanity had spoken, and now they were done speaking. Somewhere, in the Black Sea between the stars, human ships moved without a trace, unseen but unstoppable. The galaxy had always believed peace was weakness. They were about to learn that humanity's version of peace was simply the space between wars, a silence that only ended when mercy ran out. And so the stars waited, trembling in the quiet that followed, wondering what the humans would do next. Because everyone knew that the species that once said "we come in peace" had finally stopped pretending to be polite. The laughter didn't fade quickly. It spread like a sickness across the stars. Planets that had never even met a human found amusement in mocking them. The council media called Earth's message the joke of the century. In the great trade hubs, entertainers performed skits where actors dressed as humans bowed before alien rulers, begging for peace. Children in alien academies learned jokes about the fragile species that thinks words can stop war. It became fashionable to insult humanity, and dangerous to defend them. The Galactic Council, made up of over 100 advanced civilizations, decided to educate Earth by surrounding their trade routes with inspections and tariffs, cutting their supplies, watching how long the young species could last. No one realized they were the ones being watched instead. Across the Sol system, the humans stayed silent, every broadcast quiet, every signal encrypted. There were no protests, no retaliation, just stillness. A quiet far heavier than any threat. The aliens mistook it for fear, but those who had studied humanity's history knew better. Dr. Thalen of Eshra, the historian who had once warned the council, wrote in his journal, "I have seen this silence before in their wars, right before their soldiers stop waiting and start acting. If the galaxy does not listen, they will learn what happens when patience ends." His words were ignored, buried under the noise of laughter. Weeks turned into months. Skirmishes began near the human borders. A small colony on the edge of Alpha Centauri went dark after a training exercise by the Council's navy. A trade convoy headed for Mars was intercepted, its cargo seized for inspection. The aliens called it enforcement. Humans called it provocation. Still, there was no reply. The galaxy assumed Earth had finally accepted its place. But deep beneath the calm oceans and quiet skies of Earth, the Terran coalition prepared for something the galaxy could never imagine. In the command bunker under Geneva, 12 men and women sat around a long table. Each represented a continent. Each had sworn to protect not their nation, but humanity itself. Admiral Sloane stood at the head, his voice even and cold. "They've started testing us," he said. "We've confirmed multiple raids on our colonies. They're watching to see if we'll break." General Zhao crossed her arms. "And what's our answer?" Sloane looked at her, then at the hologram of the galaxy above the table, glowing in shades of blue and red. "Our answer," he said softly, "is silence. Let them think we are weak. Let them grow confident." Around the table, no one spoke, but the air was thick with understanding. They were not surrendering. They were setting a trap. On the moon, the underground shipyards of the Terran Defense Network came to life. Engines that hadn't been ignited in centuries began to hum. Construction drones swarmed around massive vessels that were never meant to exist publicly. These were not new ships. They were old ghosts, relics of a secret program that had survived the last World War. Humanity's greatest scientists had built them under black projects, preparing for the day when the stars would stop being quiet. They were called the Reclaimers, ships designed for deterrence, not invasion, until now. In a hangar beneath the lunar surface, Commander Arya Kent walked between two of the massive warships, their dark hulls gleaming under floodlights. She stopped beside a technician, a young recruit barely 20, whose eyes were wide at the sight. "Are these really ours?" he asked softly. Arya looked up at the towering ship, her voice distant. "They always were. We just kept them asleep." The recruit hesitated, then whispered, "Do you think they'll come for us?" Arya's expression hardened. "They already have. They just don't know who they're dealing with." Meanwhile, the Galactic Council was growing bolder. They deployed patrol fleets around the solar system for peacekeeping observation. Their warships lingered near Jupiter, orbiting Saturn, sending reports that mocked human defenses. "Their fleet is outdated," one alien admiral said to his crew. "Their ships are slow, their weapons laughable. They'll fold at the first strike." When the recording of that conversation leaked, the Galaxy laughed again. But on Mars, where the Terran Fleet Command was hidden beneath layers of red dust, Admiral Sloan watched the same footage in silence. "They think strength comes from power," he said. "They've forgotten what strength looks like when it's born from loss." On Earth, people began to notice strange changes. The night skies over the Pacific flashed faintly as defense satellites repositioned. Civilian air traffic was reduced without explanation. The news networks asked questions, but no one in power gave answers. The public only heard one phrase repeated whenever they asked if war was coming: "Humanity does not start wars. Humanity ends them." Still, the tension was growing. The first real spark came when a small alien fleet entered Earth's orbit without permission. The Council called it a routine patrol, but it was a show of dominance. Dozens of alien ships hovered above the planet like vultures, their engines casting shadows across the clouds. Global networks captured the moment, streaming it live across every screen. People watched, hearts pounding, as the Council fleet demanded Earth surrender all orbital weaponry and submit to a peace enforcement act. The ultimatum was broadcast in a tone of smug superiority. "You asked for peace. We are here to ensure it, under our terms." The humans did not answer. The fleet waited, confused. Hours passed. Then days. Finally, as the aliens prepared to withdraw, a small human shuttle emerged from the clouds, unarmed, carrying no insignia but a simple white flag. It approached the alien flagship, transmitting the same message that had started everything: "We come in peace." The alien commander laughed, ordering his men to record the moment. "Look at them," he said, still clinging to their little illusions. But as the shuttle came closer, the commander's smile faded. The craft wasn't broadcasting a human signal. It was emitting something else, a code the Council had banned long ago. Within seconds, every alien ship system went dark. Power shut down. Engines froze. The fleet hung motionless above Earth, trapped in orbit by an unknown signal pulsing from the shuttle. Then the transmission changed. The same calm human voice filled every bridge, every control room, every screen. "You ignored our peace. You took our silence for surrender. We do not seek war, but we will finish what you began." The next second, the shuttle turned and vanished into the atmosphere. Power returned to the alien fleet, but half their ships no longer responded. The ones that did reported strange system damage, their weapons locked, their engines reduced to half power. When the fleet limped home, the Council called it a malfunction. But everyone knew what had happened. Earth had sent a reply: quiet, efficient, devastating. The Galaxy reacted with shock. The same species that had begged for peace had just disabled a fleet without firing a shot. The Council demanded answers, but none came. The human channels remained silent, their signals encrypted beyond decoding. Fear began to creep into the places where laughter had once been. The powerful empires that had mocked humanity began to run simulations, trying to calculate the risk of a human attack. The results were never released to the public. Dr. Thalen, the historian, wrote again in his journal: "The humans are not fighting yet. They are waiting. They are watching. And when they move, it will not be for conquest. It will be for reminder, a reminder of why their peace should never have been ignored." And in the deep void beyond Neptune, hidden among the shadows of drifting ice, a massive silhouette moved slowly, the faint blue light of its engines flickering against the darkness. On its hull, worn but still visible, were the words TSF Valiant. The ship had not been seen in 200 years. It was one of Earth's oldest dreadnoughts, a relic of the last war, now awakened once more. Its crew, silent, focused, prepared for what was to come. In the heart of the ship, Captain Arya Kent stood before the observation window, the curve of Earth faint in the distance, her reflection calm but cold. "They laughed when we spoke," she said quietly to her crew, "but they'll listen when we stop." The words hung heavy in the air, quiet and powerful, a promise written not in anger but in resolve. And as the Valiant turned its massive frame toward the stars, its engines roaring to life, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The Galaxy had gone uneasy, but pride still blinded the powerful. The Council's admirals swore that humanity was bluffing, that the fleet incident was a trick of technology or a coincidence of timing. Yet deep inside, fear had begun to whisper. Fleets that once mocked Earth now patrolled their borders in silence, watching for movement that never came. Reporters demanded answers, citizens protested the Council's arrogance, and the mighty races who had ruled the stars for centuries felt something unfamiliar, doubt. Meanwhile, in the black sea of space between the stars, the humans watched and waited. They didn't send threats, didn't issue demands, didn't raise their voices. Their silence stretched across the galaxy like a drawn blade, unseen, but sharp enough to cut through arrogance. In the hidden chambers of the Terran High Command beneath Mars, the atmosphere was calm but tense, a quiet hum of machinery filling the underground facility where Earth's leaders gathered. Admiral Sloan stood before a massive holographic map of the galaxy, thousands of red markers flickering across the display. Each one representing an enemy fleet, a border outpost, or a listening station that had reported hostile activity. He folded his hands behind his back, his reflection faint in the glass as his voice broke the silence. They still think we're scared. General Zhao, standing beside him, crossed her arms. Good. Let them think that a little longer. Sloan nodded. They believe silence means fear, but silence is just preparation they can't see. Around them, officers moved with precision. No shouting, no panic. Only the sound of quiet determination. Humanity had faced extinction before, but never like this, not against an entire galaxy that underestimated them. A message came through the encrypted channel, a simple text feed glowing on the display, Reclaimer fleet operational. Awaiting authorization. Sloan stared at it for a long moment before replying, authorization granted. Initiate Operation Ghost Veil. Across the solar system, hidden under the shadows of planets and moons, entire fleets that the galaxy didn't know existed began to wake. In the darkness near Saturn, the TSF Valiant led the charge, its systems coming fully online. Beneath the icy crust of Europa, hangar doors opened, revealing sleek black vessels shaped like arrows of steel, each one powered by engines that bent light around them, erasing their presence from scans. From Mercury's side, solar shields retracted, exposing massive launch silos that had been disguised as mining arrays. Every system was awakening, like nerves firing in a sleeping giant's body. On the moon, Commander Arya Kent stood inside the war room, her gloved hand tracing over a hologram of the Milky Way. The officers around her waited, their faces illuminated by the cold blue light. She turned to them, her voice calm but filled with something deeper, pride, pain, and resolve. They mocked us for offering peace, she said. They burned our colonies and took our silence as surrender. But we were never silent out of fear. We were silent out of memory. We know what war costs. We know what it destroys. And that's why we fight it differently. Her words carried through the room, quiet but steady, and no one moved as she continued. When humanity strikes, we do it not to rule, not to conquer, but to remind the universe what happens when mercy is mistaken for weakness. She paused, her eyes cold as the void. We ask them to stand beside us. Now they'll stand beneath us, or not at all. In that same moment, far beyond the solar system, a Council warship approached a derelict asteroid belt, one that had once been a human mining site. The alien commander, tall and armored in silver plates, stared at his sensor officer. No human presence detected, he asked. None, sir, the officer replied. All readings clear. The commander smirked. Good. Then let's see if their silence hides anything worth fearing. The ship descended, scanning the asteroids, unaware that deep within one of them, something ancient stirred. A faint blue light flickered, a signal long dormant. In seconds, the asteroid's surface split apart, panels folding back to reveal the hidden barrel of a massive cannon, one that dwarfed the alien ship. Before the crew could react, the weapon fired. A beam of white light so bright it cut through the void and erased the warship in an instant. The asteroid closed again, returning to stillness as if nothing had happened. The Council never learned what destroyed their vessel. They called it a cosmic event. But across the stars, more ships vanished the same way, near empty space, near quiet worlds, near forgotten moons. The galaxy began to whisper of ghosts, of invisible weapons that came and went without sound, leaving only silence behind. In the dark corners of the trade networks, smugglers spoke of the Reapers of Sol, human ships that didn't appear on radar, that struck like lightning and vanished into the void. The Council dismissed it as rumor, but fear was spreading, slow and steady, like cracks beneath glass. Back on Mars, Admiral Sloan received the latest report from the intelligence unit. 17 fleets missing in the last cycle, the officer said quietly. Sloan didn't react, didn't smile, didn't celebrate. 17 lessons unlearned, he said simply. General Zhao leaned forward, the Council's moving fleets toward the outer rim. They think the attacks are pirates. Sloan turned to her, his expression hard. Let them chase ghosts. By the time they realize where the real enemy is, it'll be too late. He turned back to the hologram, zooming in on the Council's central worlds. The image of the shining capital, Ela Prime, glowed bright. They built their empire on arrogance, he said softly. Let's see how it holds against truth. Meanwhile, in the vast silence of deep space, human fleets trained without light, without sound, learning to fight as shadows. The young recruits were told only one thing before deployment. You are the silence that comes before thunder. They didn't cheer. They didn't shout. They simply nodded. These were not soldiers raised on glory. They were survivors raised on loss. Each ship carried names etched into its hull. The names of colonies burned, of families lost, of peace betrayed. It wasn't hatred that fueled them, but memory. And yet, among all this, humanity still hoped. On Earth, cities still glowed under starlight. Children still played, farmers still worked, people still dreamed. The civilians didn't know the full truth, but they felt it. A tension, a waiting, like the pause before a storm breaks. Across the world, old songs began to resurface. Songs of unity, of courage, of the day when the stars first called humanity upward. In schools, teachers told children, we came from a small world, but we learned to look up. Never forget that the sky is ours. Then one evening, every human world received the same transmission from Fleet Command. It was only a few words, but they carried the weight of history. Protocol eclipse confirmed. Defensive silence maintained. Await the signal. On Mars, on the Moon, on every colony and station, people stopped and looked at the sky. They didn't know what the signal would be or when it would come, but deep down, they knew it was close. The galaxy mistook Earth's silence for defeat. But in the quiet dark of space, silence had become humanity's greatest weapon. And soon, the Council, with all its pride and all its laughter, would learn what kind of storm had been building behind that quiet. Because when humanity finally chose to break the silence, the stars themselves would tremble. The storm began without thunder, without warning, and without a declaration. It started with the vanishing of light in the empty edges of Council space, where beacons once blinked steady and proud but now went dark one by one, like candles snuffed out by an unseen hand. Entire patrol fleets stopped responding. Merchant convoys disappeared mid-transmission. At first, the Council blamed pirates, cosmic storms, anything but the possibility that humanity had finally decided to move. The word war wasn't spoken yet, but fear was already walking the corridors of their grand halls. No one wanted to believe that the same species they had mocked for sending a message of peace could be capable of something this precise, this cold, this silent. But deep inside, even the most arrogant officials began to wonder if perhaps Earth's message had never been about peace at all. It had been a warning the galaxy was too proud to hear. In the frozen silence of deep space, near the border world of Vetrax 9, an alien fleet patrolled the region. 37 ships strong, commanded by High Admiral Kor of the Threx Dominion. He had been among the loudest voices mocking humanity months ago. They speak peace because they have no claws, he had said to his officers once. But as his fleet drifted near an abandoned human relay, he felt unease creeping beneath his armor. Sensors? He asked. Nothing unusual, sir, his aide replied. No life signs, no energy readings, no vessels within range. Kor frowned, his 6 eyes narrowing. "Too quiet," he muttered. He turned toward the dark window of his flagship, the reflection of the stars glinting against his metallic skin. And then, without sound, the stars vanished. A shadow fell across his view, blotting out the galaxy itself. The bridge went still. "Identify that object," he barked. The sensors flickered, their readings looping nonsense. It's massive," his officer stammered, 30 kilometers long, maybe more. "It's not on any registry." Kor's voice turned sharp. "It's not a ship," he said, though his tone trembled. But it was. Slowly, from the black, a shape began to emerge, sleek, angular, impossibly vast. Its hull reflected no light, its engines whispered no sound. Across its side, faint blue lines pulsed in rhythm like a heartbeat. And in the center, carved into the metal, glowed a single emblem, the rising phoenix of Earth. Kor's breath caught. "Open channels," he ordered, "now." But before he could speak, a voice filled the bridge, transmitted not by radio, not by comms, but directly into their systems. It was a human voice, calm, deliberate, spoken in every tongue of the galaxy. "You ignored our message of peace," it said, "so we learned to speak in yours." The crew froze. For a heartbeat, everything stood still. Then light burst from the shadow, a single, narrow beam, white and pure, silent and merciless. The flagship of the Threx Dominion was erased in an instant, turned to vapor before anyone could scream. The other ships panicked, firing in every direction, but their weapons hit nothing. The giant ship did not return fire again. It simply drifted past, silent, serene, leaving only silence in its wake. When the Council received the report, it was incomplete, half the data corrupted, half the footage erased. But what remained was undeniable. A human vessel of impossible scale had appeared from nowhere, destroyed an entire fleet, and disappeared again. Panic spread like infection. "How can they have that kind of power?" the Council chair shouted during an emergency meeting. "They are centuries behind us in technology." Others argued, desperate to find comfort in their own lies. "It's a trick. It must be a single weapon. They can't have more than one." But deep down, even as they argued, the truth clawed at them. Humanity had spent its silence building, waiting, and now they had tools the galaxy could not comprehend. Back on Mars, inside Fleet Command, Admiral Sloan watched the footage of the Vetrax engagement in silence. Around him, officers exchanged uneasy glances. One finally spoke, "Sir, do we go public with the strike?" Sloan didn't look away from the hologram as he answered, his voice calm, "No. Let them tell the story for us. Fear travels faster than any broadcast." He turned off the display and faced his officers. The galaxy needed to be reminded that we asked for peace first. Now they'll learn that mercy has an expiration date. While the Council scrambled to maintain control, other species began to whisper. The smaller worlds, long bullied and taxed by the Council's power, started sending encrypted transmissions to Earth. Pleas for protection, for alliance, for understanding. For the first time, the galaxy looked at humanity not as weak, but as something far more dangerous, unpredictable. Earth did not respond to any of them. They remained silent. The silence itself became an answer. In the farthest reaches of space, the TSF Valiant continued its mission, leading the silent fleet known only as the Ghost Line. Commander Arya Kent stood on the observation deck, watching the streaks of light slide past as they entered another system. Around her, the crew moved with quiet precision, every face reflecting the same mixture of sorrow and resolve. She placed her hand on the cold glass, her voice low. "We gave them a chance," she said softly. "We begged them to listen." Her second-in-command nodded beside her, his expression grim. "Now they will listen, Commander," he said. "But they won't like what they hear." On the Council's homeworld of Ela Prime, the first signs of panic reached the public. News networks showed images of destroyed fleets, of empty signals, of worlds that had lost contact overnight. The chairwoman of the Council, Lorraine of the Threx Dominion, appeared on every screen, her once arrogant voice trembling as she spoke. "These attacks are acts of terrorism. Humanity will be held accountable. But even as she said it, her own military refused to move. They'd seen what had happened to those who tried. Inside the Grand Council chamber, chaos reigned. Dozens of representatives shouted over one another, their words filled with fear. They were primitive, one screamed. How did we not see this? They were never primitive, said another, his voice breaking. They were patient. The council's historian, Thalen of Eshra, stood in the shadows, watching the panic unfold, the old sadness heavy in his chest. They tried to warn us, he whispered to himself, and we laughed. Back on Earth, the skies above the cities remained calm. Civilians still worked, still lived, still dreamed, unaware that their fleets now haunted the stars. The world governments maintained silence, the media still blocked from knowing the truth. But in the underground command centers, every screen pulsed with blue light as messages flowed between the hidden fleets. Operation Ghost Veil successful. Enemy contact neutralized. No civilian targets. No casualties. Humanity was fighting not for conquest but for precision, ensuring that every strike carried a message, we warned you. Then came the next moment that shattered the illusion of safety forever. The Council gathered a coalition of their most powerful fleets, 300 ships, from 12 of the galaxy's greatest empires, and sent them toward Sol. Their purpose was clear: destroy Earth before the humans could strike again. It was the largest military force assembled in centuries. But when they arrived at the edge of the solar system, they found nothing. No defenses. No response. Just empty space. The fleet commander, Admiral Giraffe, smirked. They've fled, he said proudly. Typical. He ordered the fleet forward. The ships advanced. Then, slowly, one by one, their sensors went dark. Power failed. Engines froze. And then they saw it. Hundreds of faint blue lights igniting behind them. The humans had been waiting. Not in front. Behind. The fleet turned, panic spreading like fire. The stars themselves seemed to move as invisible shapes surrounded them, massive vessels hidden by cloaking fields. A single transmission came through, this time not from Earth, but from the Valiant. Commander Arya Kent's voice filled the void. We asked for peace. You demanded submission. You leave us no choice. The feed cut off. Seconds later, the Council fleet was gone, erased from existence by weapons no one could explain. Back in the Council chamber, the news reached them. The silence after the report was longer than any in history. No one laughed this time. The galaxy that had mocked Earth now stared into the dark, realizing too late that they were not dealing with diplomats anymore. They were dealing with survivors. And survivors, when pushed too far, don't fight for victory. They fight to end the threat completely. In the quiet dark of his office, Admiral Sloane stood before a window overlooking Mars, the red planet glowing beneath the distant sun. He whispered to himself, they thought our peace was weakness. They forgot peace is only given by those strong enough to enforce it. And somewhere beyond the stars, the silent fleets of humanity drifted through the void, calm and patient, waiting for the next voice to challenge them. The galaxy that once laughed at Earth now trembled beneath the weight of its own silence. Across the central systems, panic spread like wildfire, uncontained and desperate. Council fleets scrambled to form defensive walls around their homeworlds, their admirals barking orders that no longer inspired confidence. Every broadcast was the same: static, silence, missing fleets. The pride of the Council, the grand armada of 1,000 worlds, had been humiliated, not by superior numbers, but by precision, by a species that fought not with fury, but with memory. And that terrified them more than any weapon ever could. In the heart of the Galactic Council chamber, chaos ruled. Ambassadors shouted over one another, blaming one race after another. The humans are using forbidden technology, cried one. They've allied with rogue machines, shouted another. None could explain how Earth, the primitive world, could strike with such mastery. The chairwoman of the council, Lur-Ain, slammed her clawed hands on the table, her voice trembling with rage. Enough! We cannot allow them to continue this unchecked. They have attacked our fleets, They must be brought to heel. But even as she spoke, the lights in the chamber flickered, a brief pulse that made every heart stop. It lasted only a second, but it was enough to remind them of the nightmare they now faced. The humans could reach anywhere, even here. In the hidden bunkers beneath Mars, Admiral Sloan watched the Council's broadcast unfold. The anger, the fear, the denial. He said nothing, but the faintest hint of a smile touched his face. "They are falling apart," murmured General Zhao beside him. Sloan nodded, eyes cold. Panic is their greatest weakness. They never learned patience. They never learned silence. Now they're choking on it. The two stood before a wall of holographic screens displaying intercepted Council transmissions. Arguments, retreat orders, whispers of surrender. "Should we answer them?" Zhao asked quietly. Sloan shook his head. "Not yet. Let them talk themselves into collapse." He paused, his voice lowering. "When we speak, it will be the last thing they hear." Meanwhile, across the colonies that had once feared annihilation, humanity's quiet resurgence had become legend. The miners of Titan, the farmers of Ceres, the engineers of Luna, they all whispered the same thing: Earth has awakened. Children grew up hearing the stories of invisible fleets and the phoenix emblem that burned across the stars like a promise of vengeance. But among the soldiers, the tone was different. There was no celebration, no joy in victory. They knew what it cost to reach this point: decades of humiliation, hundreds of lives lost in forgotten outposts, entire colonies erased because they believed too much in peace. Commander Arya Kent stood before her crew aboard the TSF Valiant, her voice low but steady. "We didn't want this," she said, her hand resting on the console that controlled weapons powerful enough to break planets. "We didn't build this fleet to conquer. We built it to survive. But they turned our silence into shame, and now they'll learn what that silence was meant to protect." Her crew watched her with solemn eyes, knowing that every word carried truth. On the Council's capital, the panic deepened. Civilian ships tried to flee, crowding ports as soldiers struggled to maintain order. News networks broadcast conflicting reports, some claiming that humanity had unleashed an ancient weapon, others insisting that alien rebels were using the chaos to destroy the Council from within. But then came the second broadcast from Earth. This time, it wasn't encrypted. It wasn't hidden. It played on every frequency, on every planet, on every ship. The same calm voice echoed through the stars, the same voice that once begged for peace. "We asked for peace. We received mockery. We sent silence. You called it surrender. You were warned once. This is your last." Then, the transmission ended. No threats. No demands. Just silence again. The reaction was immediate. The Council voted to send another coalition fleet, this one 5 times larger than the last. But their commanders hesitated. "They wiped out the Vetrax fleet in minutes," one general argued. "If we send more, we'll only feed the fire." Others refused to believe it. "They are human," shouted a senator, pounding his fist. "They are flesh and bone. They can bleed." But when they sent probes toward Sol, not one returned. The systems went dark the moment they crossed the border. No signal. No debris. Nothing. It was as if space itself swallowed them whole. Among the smaller civilizations, hope began to rise, not fear. The oppressed races who had been crushed under the Council's rule for centuries began whispering of alliance. A trader from the Ashen Rim said he saw a human vessel deliver medicine to a plague world without asking for payment. A mining colony in the Oran Belt reported that a human scout ship had stopped a pirate raid, then vanished before they could thank them. To these people, humanity was not a monster but a shadow, a guardian that punished cruelty. The galaxy's most powerful feared humanity's strength. The weakest began to pray for their arrival. In the Council's private chambers, Chairwoman Luraine stared out over the glittering city of Ela Prime. Her aide approached cautiously. What are your orders?" She didn't answer at first. Her gaze lingered on the night sky, where the stars no longer looked peaceful but watchful. "Do you know what the humans said when they first sent their message of peace?" she asked softly. "They said they wanted a galaxy without fear. And now they've created one, just not the way we expected." She turned toward her aide, her eyes hollow. Prepare for defense. If they come here, we won't survive. Back in the hidden depths of the solar system, humanity's final preparations began. Massive factories on Mars shifted from production to deployment. The Reclaimer fleet gathered near the outer edges of Neptune, engines glowing faint blue against the dark. Admiral Sloane stood before his officers, his voice steady but laced with something that sounded almost like sorrow. They made their choice, he said. We warned them with words, with patience, with silence. But they only understand power. So we'll give them what they asked for. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but to remind them, peace is not weakness. Peace is strength restrained. As the command sequence began, the fleet's engines roared to life, thousands of ships aligning in perfect formation. From Earth's orbit, the glow could be seen from the ground, streaks of silver and blue cutting through the blackness like blades drawn in unison. Civilians across the planet stopped to watch, breathless. Some cried. Some prayed. Some whispered the words of the first peace message, remembering how it had begun with hope. But now, hope wore armor. Now, peace had a fleet. And as the human ships disappeared into the void, one by one, heading toward the heart of the galaxy, only one phrase echoed through every transmission, every outpost, every soul that knew what was coming. Humanity asked nicely. Now it will answer truthfully. The galaxy had forgotten what true silence meant until humanity gave it back to them. 4 weeks after the final broadcast, no human signal left the Sol system. No fleet was sighted. No word came through the networks. The Council called it retreat, desperate to comfort themselves. But deep down every leader, every admiral, every soldier felt the same dread. That this was not retreat, but waiting. The calm before something final. On the Council's outer colonies, citizens packed their belongings and fled inward. Entire planets dimmed their lights, terrified that a single flicker might draw attention. The empires that had mocked humanity now whispered prayers to their own gods, pleading not for victory but for mercy. Yet, mercy was the one thing humanity had run out of. Far away from the trembling core, beyond the edge of mapped space, the Terran fleet gathered in the shadows. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A formation of thousands of warships, silent as stone, drifting in perfect unity. The stars reflected across their black hulls like ghosts, each ship carrying the insignia of the Phoenix, glowing faintly against the endless dark. In the center, the TSF Valiant loomed like a cathedral of war, engines dimmed, shields at full charge. Inside its command bridge, Commander Arya Kent stood before the vast viewing window, her face calm but her eyes burning with unspoken fire. Around her, the crew worked quietly, their movements methodical, their expressions heavy with purpose. All fleets report in, she said. One by one, the responses came, Reclaimer 1 ready. Ghost Line in position. Nova Wing standing by. Each voice was firm, steady, the tone of soldiers who knew the weight of history rested on their shoulders. In the silence that followed, Admiral Sloane's voice came through from Fleet Command, a low, steady tone carried across light years. For too long, we tried to be better than our past, he said. We offered peace to those who wanted power, mercy to those who thrived on cruelty. We believed we could change the galaxy with kindness. But now the galaxy will learn what our silence meant. Arya closed her eyes, her jaw tightening as his words sank in. The Council has made their choice. We give them their consequence. Commence Operation Final Dawn. The words spread through the network like fire through oxygen. Across the fleet, engines ignited, light blooming in the darkness. It wasn't the roar of war, it was a steady hum, cold, exact, inevitable. As the ships began to move, one could almost mistake them for stars shifting in formation, but these were not stars. These were storms given shape. The Council first noticed when their long-range satellites started vanishing. Then communication relays near the outer rim fell silent. Within hours, entire trade routes went dark. Reports poured in, human fleets appearing without warning, disabling weapon systems without firing a single shot, seizing control of power grids, then vanishing again. But this time, they didn't just strike fleets. They struck control. The Council's infrastructure began collapsing from within. Factories stopped, military databases were wiped, starports fell into blackout. Panic turned to paralysis. No one could coordinate. No one could command. It was as if the galaxy's own heartbeat had been stolen, and humanity now held it in their palm. Chairwoman Lorraine stood in the Council war chamber, her voice breaking as she shouted at her generals. Do something. Fight them. But the generals only stared at the floor. We can't, one finally whispered. They're inside our systems. They control our ships before we even issue commands. Another general, trembling, looked up. They're not fighting us. They're erasing us. On the surface of Ela Prime, the skies turned crimson as human ships descended through the clouds, silent and controlled. There were no warning sirens, no battle cries. The citizens watched in horror and awe as hundreds of dark vessels hovered above the capital, motionless, their lights flickering like a heartbeat. And then a broadcast echoed through the air, heard not through devices but through every speaker, every screen, every network across the galaxy. It was the same calm human voice, steady, unhurried, merciless. You mistake our silence for surrender. You mistake our kindness for fear. You were warned. The broadcast ended, and then the ships vanished, leaving behind no damage, no casualties, just silence and a single symbol burned into every data system in the Council's empire. The Phoenix of Earth. The message was clear, Earth had arrived, and there would be no more warnings. Inside the Council chamber, the representatives sat in stunned quiet. Some wept, others trembled, but none spoke. Dr. Thalen, the old historian who had once warned them of humanity's patience, stood slowly, his voice hoarse. They are not destroying us, he said. They are reminding us. Every empire that ever tried to rule through arrogance forgot one thing: mercy belongs only to the strong. His words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and bitter. Back on the Valiant, Arya Kent watched as the final transmissions from the Council systems flickered out. Her crew looked to her for orders. No civilian targets, she said firmly. This is not revenge. It's correction. Her second-in-command nodded. And when it's done? She stared into the void, her reflection faint in the glass. When it's done, she said softly, we rebuild what they broke. Hours later, the Council surrendered, not through negotiation, not through diplomacy, but through silence. One by one, their leaders transmitted a single line of text: we hear you. The words reached Earth's command center, and for the first time in decades, Admiral Sloane allowed himself a deep breath. Then perhaps, he said quietly, the galaxy will finally learn to listen. But the victory did not feel like triumph. Across the Terran fleet, soldiers stood in silence, watching the stars. Some cried quietly, others simply stared. They had won, but in their hearts they knew, this was not a victory of joy, it was the price of peace. Humanity had become what it never wanted to be. The reminder that mercy, once ignored, can turn to judgment. As the fleets turned back toward Sol, the stars around them shimmered with quiet light. The galaxy was forever changed. The age of laughter and arrogance had ended, replaced by a new order born from humanity's silence. On Earth, the dawn broke over calm oceans, painting the sky gold. The world looked peaceful again, but beneath that calm, the message remained clear: peace is not given. It is earned. And once lost, it never comes without a price. And so, the galaxy's last whisper of defiance faded, leaving only the echo of Earth's words lingering in the void. Words once mocked, now immortal. We asked for peace. You refused. Now you understand why our silence was mercy. The war ended not with fire, but with silence. No treaty was signed, no armies marched in triumph, no victory celebrations filled the streets. The galaxy simply stopped fighting. One by one, the great empires that had mocked humanity's peace message lowered their flags, not out of submission, but exhaustion. Planets once filled with arrogance now trembled in humility. The stars that had once burned with pride now flickered with reflection. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Galactic Council's chambers stood empty, its great banners torn down, its marble halls abandoned. The galaxy that had ruled through fear had been dismantled by the very species it had once called naive. Humanity had spoken, not with guns, not with speeches, but with action. The kind of action that reshapes empires and rewrites destiny. Back on Earth, the dawn broke quietly over the Pacific. The cities were calm, the skies clear. Children played in the streets unaware that their world had just shifted the balance of power for an entire galaxy. In the heart of Geneva, inside the Terran High Command bunker, Admiral Sloane stood alone before the holographic map of the Milky Way. The red markers that had once filled the display, symbols of enemy fleets and hostile systems, were gone. In their place, there were blue lights, spreading outward like veins of light from Sol, each one representing peace agreements, rebuilding efforts, and new beginnings. Sloane stared at it for a long time, the weight of it pressing deep into his chest. General Zhao entered quietly behind him. "It's over," she said softly. "We did it." Sloane didn't look up. "No," he murmured, his voice low, heavy with fatigue. "We ended it. That's not the same." He turned, his eyes reflecting both pride and grief. "We gave them a warning they'll never forget," he continued. "But every warning comes with a cost. We reminded them what peace costs when it's taken for granted. Now we'll have to teach them what it means to deserve it." Zhao nodded silently. Around them, screens displayed incoming messages from across the galaxy. Small colonies requesting aid, former enemy planets asking for counsel. Humanity wasn't feared anymore. It was respected. But beneath that respect, there was still unease. Everyone now understood that Earth's silence meant strength, and that strength meant responsibility. On Mars, the soldiers of the Reclaimer fleet returned home. Their ships, scarred from battle but unbroken, descended through the red dust storms, greeted not by fanfare but by solemn applause. Families waited at the docks with tears in their eyes. Some soldiers stepped off their ships and fell to their knees, kissing the ground. Others looked to the sky, their faces unreadable, haunted by what they had seen. Commander Arya Kent stood at the edge of the landing field, watching as her crew disembarked. The younger officers looked lost, not in fear, but in disbelief. "We won," one whispered. "Why does it feel so heavy?" Arya turned to him, her voice soft but firm. "Because true victory never feels light," she said. "Peace isn't something you celebrate. It's something you protect." That night, as the twin moons rose over Mars, Arya found herself alone in the observation dome, the stars stretching endlessly beyond the glass. For years, those stars had been symbols of betrayal and threat. Now, they looked peaceful again, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching. "We asked for peace," she whispered to the quiet void. "We meant it. We always meant it." Her reflection stared back at her, a reminder of the burden carried by those who choose to defend rather than destroy. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, whispering a silent promise to the stars. "We won't become what they were." Across the galaxy, changes began to take shape. Worlds that had once lived under the shadow of the Council's oppression began rebuilding, this time with humanity's help. The Reclamation Act, passed by Earth's leaders, sent aid ships instead of fleets, engineers instead of soldiers. Human doctors treated alien children in faraway worlds. Terran diplomats rebuilt councils based not on hierarchy but equality. For the first time, species that had never spoken to each other shared a table. And when they did so under a new banner, not of conquest, but of unity. A white flag bearing the golden phoenix of Earth, wings spread across the stars, symbolizing not dominance, but renewal. In time, the phrase Galactic Council faded into history. What replaced it was something smaller, quieter, but stronger, the alliance of free worlds, led not by fear, but by memory. Its first charter began with the same words Earth had spoken at the beginning of everything: "We come in peace." Only this time, no one laughed. Every species that signed that charter remembered what had happened when the galaxy ignored those words. Years passed, and humanity began to fade from the forefront of power. They did not seek to rule, they sought to guide. Their fleets remained hidden, their soldiers returned home, and their weapons were locked away in the archives of the moon. A reminder of what patience could build and what pride could destroy. Earth returned to what it always wanted to be, a home, not a throne. But the memory of what humanity had done lingered across generations. The story of the message of peace, the laughter that followed, and the silence that answered became legend. Children across alien worlds learned of the day the galaxy mocked a small blue planet, and how that planet taught the stars humility. Dr. Thalen, the historian who had once been ridiculed for defending humanity, spent his last years writing the definitive chronicle of those events. In his final entry, he wrote, "They never wanted war. They wanted understanding. We mistook compassion for weakness, patience for cowardice, silence for surrender. But when they finally spoke, they did not speak with hatred. They spoke with truth, the kind of truth that burns but cleanses. And from that fire, we were reborn." His words became the foundation of the new Alliance Creed, carved into stone at its capital on Ela Prime. 1 year later, a memorial was built on Earth, not a monument of pride, but remembrance. It stood atop a hill overlooking the old United Nations site, a tall white spire engraved with the names of every colony lost before the final dawn. At its base was a single inscription, "To those who believed peace was enough." When Admiral Sloan visited the site for the last time, he placed his old officer's badge at the foot of the monument and whispered, "We were never the monsters they feared. We just reminded them that mercy is a choice." As night fell, the stars above Earth shimmered, brighter than they had in centuries. The warships that once haunted the void now drifted peacefully in orbit, their lights dimmed, their weapons powered down. The galaxy watched from afar, still in awe of the species that had once been mocked for speaking softly, the species that had taught the stars what happens when softness is tested. And so, in the quiet light of a new age, the story came full circle. Earth's final message echoed once more, not as a warning this time, but as a truth engraved into the heart of the galaxy itself. We asked for peace. We gave it. When you refused, we showed you why you should have listened. And from that day on, every civilization that rose and fell under the watchful eyes of the stars remembered. The most dangerous voice in the galaxy was not the one that shouted in anger, but the one that whispered in peace and meant every word.